AOPA headquarters. In fact, we are all at AOPA headquarters at the moment. Today's topic, or this month's topic, is FRATs you shouldn't rush. Hope you get the pun that we try to do, and other SOPs to make you a safer pilot. So we're excited to talk about this one today. I know Mary and I have worked hard on this, but as always, before we begin, let's make sure we take care of some of that basic housekeeping, just to make sure everybody knows how everything operates. The big thing you want to pay attention to here is your attendee control panel. So if you're on a computer, you're looking at that right side of the screen there, that right part right here, and you're looking for the little, looks like a cartoon speech bubble with a question mark in it. You'll click on that, then go down here to type in your question and make sure you hit that send button, because otherwise we won't see it. If you happen to be on a tablet, iPad or something like that, then you're looking for the little question mark. Should look something like this. Type in your question again and make sure you hit that send button again to make sure that we see it here. My name is Chris Moser, here from AOPA headquarters. I work with flight schools and CFIs, and I am a CFI myself. And with me, glad to have, is Dan Justman.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here as well. Dan Justman, Vice President of You Can Fly. I get to lead the high school flight training flying club's Rusty Pilots initiatives that make up the You Can Fly programs, and also the scholarships program that supports each and every one of those and pilots on every step of their aviation journey. Also with us today, the ever popular, happy Mary Kuehn from AOPA Air Safety Institute.
Hello, happy to be here. I from Air Safety Institute, I run the AOPA Flight Instructor Refresher course, the chief flight instructor of that. Also happy to be on the webinar every month with Chris. I'm a CFI and CFII and my ATP. So excited about today.
Very
awesome.
Cool.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Of course, behind the scenes, our man of mystery, Stephen Schroeder. Stephen, could you please say hi, Stephen?
Hi, Stephen.
Nice.
I think, wait, I wanted to.
Oh, we got ring lights. We want to show off.
Look at that ring light to work.
Oh, yeah. Show you can see everybody better with ring lights.
Oh, all right. I might take a little more coordinating. I am a coordinator with the team here, by the way. We have a variety of tasks, including our Flight Training Experience Awards, producing the webinar series, and a few other newsletter publication projects. So it's always a pleasure.
Very good. And we get to be here today as part of the AOPA Foundation. So this webinar and many other things are supported by generous donations. So we get to do what we do, made possible by those. If you are already a donor of the AOPA Foundation, thank you. We greatly appreciate your dedication to growing, supporting general aviation, keeping it safe, and providing that legacy of fun and enjoyment for others down the road. If you're not yet a donor, we encourage you to check out that opportunity and more at aopafoundation.org. Wings credit. This one is an interesting one right now, isn't it? So this webinar has been approved for wings credit, but of course we're amidst a government shutdown right now. So we believe everything's going to move forward. It may be a bit delayed on that end, but we did get approval for this webinar. Everything should move forward, but if you don't get approval for your wings credit in the time that you normally see, please just hold tight and hopefully that will be coming soon. We don't have more information to share on that just yet, but know that if you have logged in using your FAAsafety.gov email address, there's nothing more that you need to do. You don't need to check in, sign in, do anything more. We'll be able to process that for you, and it will show up on your account at some point here, hopefully in the near future. If you're not sure if you use the correct email address, Stephen's going to put that crazy link that we have in there into the chat so you can see that link, grab it, go on there, and just let Stephen know what email address we should be using to provide you credit. Credit is only good for those that are watching live. We're unable to provide wings credit for those watching and a recorded version, which you can find in a couple days on YouTube at the AOPA Pilot video channel, the What's Up playlist, and also at webinars.aopa.org. Same thing, What's Up playlist available for you down the road.
And we have something new as well. I want everybody to please note as well, we've got a QR code. It's going to be on a bunch of the slides. And there's a URL. We are waiting to get a shorter URL for this, but for those looking for handouts, please don't forget we've got handouts in the go-to webinar menu, like where it normally would be, but we know some folks have a hard time finding that. So that QR code or that URL, and again, we're gonna hopefully get a short one soon, hopefully by the next webinar, then you just go to that web page. That's where you can also find our back episodes and all the materials. So you'll find the handouts there for today's webinar. It's already on there as we speak.
Excellent. Very good.
All right. Stephen?
Stephen, did we mention?
What?
Did we know on this day in 1909, German Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin formed the first national commercial airline? I'm gonna try to pronounce it correctly.
Stephen is an expert here, though, right? Because you lived in Germany for some time.
Yes, the Deutsche Luftschifffahrtsaktiengesellschaft.
That's pretty good. I think it's
Just
good.
rolls off the tongue. Yeah.
Nice and smooth. Yes.
It's the DLA, right? That sounds like a Southwest sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then was there anything else you wanted to share about that? I know that was that long name, and there was something else you found out too that I thought, any other tips? I don't remember.
I think it was like just about a year. He founded it, and about a year later, they actually began operations and began moving passengers back and forth.
Gotcha.
And I do believe that just stands for German Airship Company.
So it's super
Long
creative.
name. Yeah.
Yeah. Very original.
All right, let's go to the next one here. All right, what are we doing today? Well, what's on our checklist today? We are going to be talking about risk management. So Mary and I worked on this one. Mary, actually, you had the basic idea because you did a presentation kind of on this at the recent NAFI conference, National Association of Flight Instructors. And so we kind of took that and then we worked on it and brainstormed a bit. And here's the deal. So a lot of these risk management things you probably will have heard of before, but the key, I think the angle that we were trying to take was also giving practical examples of how they work and what we've done in our own flying, and really kind of the get down to that key takeaway. We're going to talk all about mindset as we go through this too. So I'm kind of excited about this.
Yeah.
So I think this will be a
Really
good one.
focused on the how to actually use all the things that we know about from a textbook.
All right, let's see this first one. I believe Mary Kuehn, it is you.
Yes. So a few months ago, the Air Safety Institute came out with our most recent accident case study called the Fairweather Flyer. It's an awesome video if you want to go check it out. We did link to it in our resource handout. But we're going to kind of use this as an example to base our risk management off of today. So setting up the scenario, we have a non-instrument rated pilot who made the decision to take off and flew in thunderstorms to go from, I think it's somewhere in Alabama up to Georgia or another.
Yeah, it was on the coast of Alabama to, I want to say like Mobile.
Mid-Alabama.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And this is an accurate picture of kind of what the radar looked like at the time. He was trying to get home, and so was kind of had that mindset a lot of us do a lot of the time, is trying to beat the weather. So the weather was bad, but only getting worse. And that potentially influenced his decision to go. And at the time, I think the METAR really wasn't that bad at the airport he took off from. Visibility was like 3 miles and the ceiling was broken at 4,000. But he loaded up the airplane, ended up unloading the airplane and going back to the FBO, but then going back and deciding, you know what, it's good enough after all, and made the flight. So that being said, we have a question for you all today with the scenario set up. If looking at that scenario, kind of okay weather at the airport, trying to get home, I think he had a meeting the next day.
Yes, it's right there. And the other part was the briefing too. The briefer kept telling him VFR not recommended because he's VFR only, and it's because of this heavy rain and possibles all along the way. Yeah.
So
let's go to that next slide. Stephen, we have a poll. Would you please, we haven't done this in a while, but roll the poll. There it is.
Oh, nice. So
it's
this
cool,
is my
right?
first poll with you guys. Yeah, this is awesome.
So if you would, everybody in the audience, we've got 4 choices for you here. What is your assessment of this scenario? So we've got choice A, clearly it's an accident waiting to happen. I wouldn't fall for it. Choice B, seems like a logical decision making. Seems like logical decision making by the pilot. C, it's sketchy, but I could see how the pilot decides just to go for it. And then finally D, with the airplane, or if the airplane is well equipped, I think I mistyped there. You should be good to go. It's got good equipment, should be good to go. That's what I meant by that one. So if you would, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say we're going to wait and see, and we're looking for about, hopefully about, we got 41% so far, looking for about 80% of our audience maybe to get in there. So what do you think, Mary? Which one do you think the audience is going to say?
Well, it's hindsight's always 20/20. So seeing a situation and what you would actually do is sometimes not always going to be the same. I think a lot of us do fall victim to not realizing we are experiencing some type of hazardous attitude in the moment. So I don't know what people are going to say. What
I think
do you
along
think?
those terms, maybe it's like folks might say that logical decision making by the pilot, maybe in their own terms, that sort of that relative thinking could be one.
Yeah, and sometimes people can kind of convince themselves into a flight, like, okay, well,
Mhm.
I have this much time until the weather gets here and the plane has an autopilot, so we can
Exactly.
we can make it happen.
And then even too, it's like I would say that because both of us, I know we both done quite a bit of flying as well. And have you ever had the situation? I know that I have, where I ended up maybe going when I shouldn't have gone and got myself into some situations that weren't the best. And that's certainly I
Absolutely.
learned from. Yeah.
Yeah, and then learn from it afterwards, and we'll talk about a few later.
Yes. Yeah. We'll share a few of those. So
Yeah.
okay, we've got about 78%. Let's go ahead and bring the poll back and show the results to everybody. So we can see there, our audience said number one choice is A, clearly an accident waiting to happen. I wouldn't fall for it. Then we have our second top choice, which is number 29% saying sketchy, but I could see how they might go for it. And then we got a tie for both B and D. One, the airplane's well equipped, or it seems like logical decision making. So looks like the audience is going on that side of like, this looks like a clear accident. So to that, I would argue, and we can go ahead and take the poll back. I would argue, well, then why do these things happen? Why does this happen? And in fact, I know even Mary and I are going to share a little bit of our experiences as we go on about sometimes when maybe we did it and we were lucky enough to get out of it.
Exactly. How do these accidents keep happening, and how we keep seeing the same reasons for accidents over and over and over again?
Exactly.
So why is that the case?
Yeah. Why does this stuff happen? It seems like good people, good smart people are doing this stuff. So Mary, let's see. Tell us. I think this is you, right, Ms.
I was excited about this slide because these kinds of words, risk management, hazards, risks, are all kind of philosophical, and it's hard to really put a practical application to what it actually means, especially in terms of pilots. So in the risk management handbook, actually, I found this awesome analogy where if you to think of a hazard as cars in a busy street. So the cars themselves are the hazard. The risk
I think we lost audio there, Mary. Can you hear me, or is it just me? Can you
it's
guys?
going to take over.
There we go. No, actually, I hear you now. I wasn't sure if we lost audio.
Perfect.
Go ahead, say that again.
So the hazard is the cars. The risk is actually crossing the street, and the risk management is looking both ways before you cross the street to avoid getting hit by a car. So pilots need to identify what those hazards are. So identifying what the cars are, the risk associated with it. So what is the essentially getting hit by the car? And then what can we do? What's our version of looking both ways before crossing the street?
Cool. And I think it's a great analogy because it's a process, right? That you're talking about here.
And identifying, it's not as simple as that. Obviously, we have a lot of different types of cars out there with aviation that we have to constantly be looking out for. And they're both before the flight and during the flight, which we'll talk about today. So we need to kind of establish what works for us as individual pilots to find those hazards and then mitigate them if they do happen.
And that's cool. That's one thing I want to say too, I think, just to add on to that as well as we go to this next slide, is that we're going to present some tools. Like I said, you probably have heard of a lot of these tools that we're going to talk about. Maybe there'll be some new ones for you. But the key part is it's not like we're providing you the be all end all, like this is what you have to do. What you really want to think about here is what is the process, and I want to come up with a way that I can make this process work for me, whatever that tool or method is. But I think the key parts are, I hope that's our big takeaway today, one of our big takeaways. So what does it look like, practical risk management? So what is this like in we have the theoretical stuff like you were talking about, Mary, that we see in the books and the risk management handbook. How do we then take that and actually use it in the aircraft to make it effective? And one of the big things we're doing here is examining decisions to make sure that the choices have not been influenced by a hazardous attitude. because both you and I, and we're going to share these examples a little bit later, both you and I have done it where it's like we feel like we're pretty good. I'm kind of risk averse by nature. I'm not going out trying to do anything crazy. Yet
No way.
I still got myself into situations where I was like, what was I thinking? Like, why did I know why I did it. But I
And
fell
it's
to
probably
these
on
things.
the screen right now.
Oh, it absolutely is. My big one right here is it's like we have the hazardous attitudes we talked about, we've heard of, like the macho anti-authority. For me though, my big operational pitfall is get-there-itis, and it's usually get-home-itis for me. Every time I got myself in trouble, I was trying to get home, and yeah. So it's like I don't think I fall prey to too much of that other stuff, but that one's a big one. And notice mindset's on there too, and we're going to talk about a lot
Yeah,
today.
it's awesome. So yeah, just developing how to catch yourself from falling victim to any of these things, because it's going to be different depending on what you're flying, what type of flying you're doing, what type of pilot you are.
Yep.
So really taking all that into account to make what works for you.
And I love one of the things that we have this next bullet here that was one of the things you were talking about when we were brainstorming this, was that it's about developing a system, building habits, but you even said build these habits. And I love to do flows. I've talked about that in the past on the show, but treating it like a checklist. So you build a habit and then turn that into a checklist, or even literally we're going to give them in a little later an actual checklist to use, one that you developed with ASI. So I think that's really cool. And it's really important. And the big thing for me is it's important to get the mindset, because you've got to develop this mindset. And we're going to talk a bit about self-awareness, because it can happen to you by your own choices. And they are not choices where you're just like we, when some folks might look at that example going like, oh, clearly that's an accident. It doesn't seem like that when it happens. It's like, it definitely is like, you're like definitely thinking like, oh, I'm okay. I can do this.
Very hard in the moment to recognize that you're experiencing an operational pitfall or a hazardous attitude. So having somewhere in your flow before taking a flight to self-examine of, okay, is anything influencing me right now?
Yep. And it is harder than you think. All right, so the next one we've got is personal minimums, and that is Mary, take it over.
Big thing about personal minimums is to make sure that they're established well before the flight. They're not part of the flight planning process, because that's when you start having these external pressures and these different things coming in that can influence your decision making. So establishing them far in advance so that they're set and you can abide by them. And the picture on the screen is Air Safety Institute's personal minimums. We actually call it a contract, because you're signing it at the bottom that you're going to adhere to these minimums. And it's also important to consider taking into account the plane on your personal minimums. For example, I am going to be way more comfortable flying IFR to minimums in a plane with an autopilot versus not an autopilot. But that's just because that's what I happen to be proficient in, flying with the autopilot on an instrument approach. But if you've never flown with an autopilot, that's not going to be the case for you, because that's not what you're proficient in flying. So not only have personal minimums, but even consider having them dependent on the plane that you're flying. And then working with an instructor is an awesome opportunity to kind of develop those personal minimums if you don't really know where you stand in a certain category. Maybe shoot an instrument approach with a flight instructor to see what you're comfortable with. Like, am I comfortable going to minimums? Don't try it by yourself. Try it with an instructor and see how it goes before you write that down on your piece of paper. When I got my private certificate, I was not sure what my personal minimums were for a crosswind component, because I really hadn't been keeping track of it in my training. So I drew out have you seen the tables, crosswind tables that show you the crosswind component, the wind,
like on the back of an E6B or whatever, or yeah.
And so I basically made myself a little crosswind bingo. And if I had done it before, it had a green dot on it. And if I knew it was out of my minimums, it had a red dot on it. And then after I did a flight, if I was not comfortable with it, I'd be like, that's a yellow dot. Like, I've done it, but don't think I would make the decision to do it again. So just doing something like that to kind of determine what I'm comfortable with. And we'll talk about it too in the post-flight process, going back and looking at your personal
And
minimums.
one of the things that that you, as you're talking about that and giving that example too, it really reminds me of that we have a couple of articles on the handout, and we have a couple of things in here that we got from King Schools, Martha and John. John and Martha have some amazing articles. We put a couple of them on the handout because they shared their own experiences, because when they were trained, I guess back in the 70s, I'm thinking, and they were definitely flying through the 80s and everything, and they got themselves in some really, really bad situations, and they now share that and talk about. And they said it wasn't because they were trying to be unsafe, but nobody taught them about risk management. And they did exactly that. They said that the way that they learned was they would fly, they would get themselves into a situation that was really bad, and they go, oh, I'm not doing that again. Or they might make it through one and go, okay, that was okay. And that's how they did their risk management. It was just based on experience, which is a really hard way to learn and a dangerous way to learn.
Dangerous way to learn, exactly.
And of their own admission, by the way, I'm not passing any judgment. This is literally quotes from them. They would say these things. They said this is not the way to do it. And so they've become big proponents of what we're talking about here. So I think we're ready. Let's go to this next one.
Yeah.
So SOP, standard operating procedures. So that kind of goes along with, we were kind of saying it's a nice complement to the idea of a personal minimum zone. And in fact, I know that Mary, you even said maybe the SOP, you can pull some things out of those and put those on, use those to put on your personal minimums. It makes it easier. So what are they? So standard operating procedures are rules that you set for that, my operations will be at these minimums. And if I'm not meeting this criteria, it's a no-go. Or if I exceed this criteria, I'm just going to go land and I'm done. So these are used by, typically you'll find these, I know where I came across them was when my flight school, I was at a pretty big flight school in Arizona. And then of course, when I was flying for a company, we had SOPs as well. And I know that you did as well at the airlines. And they do it obviously because the FAA is looking at these things and kind of like, they want to make sure that you're operating safely, especially in our cases of whether it was flying freight or in your case, flying passengers, trying to protect the general public. And so you've got these to make sure that your operation is actually being safe. And we have some examples I know we're going to share right now of things like that, in GA, we don't necessarily have these. You're not required to use an SOP. But then as you move up and you start to get into more structured flying, whether it's being at a larger flight school, moving into flying as a job, all of a sudden you've got these rules. And the thing that I think is really interesting here is that you've got pilots who are flying every day. So like I remember my own proficiency was way up here. Like I was sharp. I was really comfortable with what I was doing, and I was very proficient because I was doing it every day as a full-time job. And the minimums were actually higher than what I would have had to have done if I was just going out flying a 172. So for example, for me, the two things I remember were that just stick out of my mind, and we had a lot of them, was IFR approach minimums. For us, one example I have is if we were going to go and shoot an approach somewhere, if that airport's weather reporting capability, the ASOS, the AWOS, whatever, was not working, there wasn't a thing of like, well, I'm just going to go shoot the approach and see if I see the runway. I wasn't even allowed to start the approach. No weather reporting, no approach, end of story, and you just go on to the next place where you go to your alternate. That was our rule. How about you, Mary? Do you have one you wanted to share too from the? Yeah.
No, yeah, and I like that there's no decision making in it. It's just like, well, it doesn't fit my rule, and it takes out, like we've talked about, those external pressures. A few that I had at the airlines, one was low visibility taxis. So if visibility at the airport was below a certain amount, I think it was a half a mile visibility, both the captain and the first officer had to be looking outside and not doing anything else, not programming a radio, not writing something down. We have these flows during taxi, but both pilots had to be looking outside. And if we wanted to do anything, the plane had to come to a complete stop to even just like change the frequency, which is just super safe practice, and it takes the guesswork out of it. This is just what we're going to do so that we make sure we're safe every time. And I thought that was a really good one. Another one is having a rejected takeoff speed. So it doesn't always have to be weather related, but we had a speed where we're either at that speed, okay, whatever happens, we're taking off because it's safer than trying to stay on the runway, because at that point we're probably not going to stay on the runway. Right. And that's a little bit different because the airlines, those planes are so redundant that an emergency isn't ever really that critical. But having anything that just helps taking the guesswork out of that decision making. I think some examples we thought of that translated to GA would be not landing at another unfamiliar airport at night, or making the decision to divert if your destination drops below, let's say, 5 miles of visibility, if you're a VFR pilot. Just having set boundaries there to take the guesswork out of things.
And then notice the thing too is we kind of did even one where I mentioned too, and I think you did the same. I know for my company, we had to do a proficiency check every 6 months. Here I am, I'm flying every day. You know, I had weekends off, right, mostly. Sometimes I had to fly on Saturdays, right? So I'm flying every day, and then every 6 months, I was required to go with a check airman and then go fly, whether it was just a check flight or they flew the line with me to make sure that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing and that I was still proficient. And it would make me shoot and approach, all the stuff. They wanted to make sure that we stayed proficient. And so as a practical example, and I know the airlines, you did something similar, I imagine. I don't know what
yeah, every 6 months, a captain has to actually go to the sims and practice emergencies.
Right. So
Every
right there,
6 months.
and so think about it. I don't know if it depends on how much you've flown, but if you've flown a lot and know how proficient you were, it seems almost crazy, but yet that was like, okay, that's what we do. Whereas
I mean, they're
in general
flying
aviation,
70, 80 hours a month. That's
yeah.
proficient.
And so it's like as a GA pilot, it's like maybe you're only flying a few hours a month. So that's why we said, what are some practical examples of things you might consider doing for your own SOP? And so one was maybe you decide I'm going to go do a flight with an instructor, almost like you could even do like a modular flight review type of thing, so that you do it over a course of time. And by the time you're done, like, okay, I'll sign me off for my flight review. Do it every 6 months just to go check with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Operational rules and minimums, and so that's kind of the stuff we talked about. One of the ones that I thought, and I don't know if it was at school where you worked, but I came across this one and I've seen it before and I love this one, is that if you're coming into land, your approach must be stabilized. Well, they even like put parameters on that. You have to be on glide slopes. In other words, maybe it was like within, if you were using a PAPI, it's like, you know, no all reds, no all white. It's got to be on glide slope or within it and correcting. Your speed has to be within 5 knots of what it's supposed to be. And then you're configured to land and your checklist, your before landing checklist is done. If it's not, it's a go around, go reset, and then do the landing again. Because that way you're not running into this issue of like trying to save things because, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's exactly it. Gear down and locked, I think, was another one that we had, if that's applicable to you. And I think it was we just knew the number, it was like 6 things. And so you just make sure you have all those 6 things done by a set point, again, to take the guesswork out of if it's safe to land. Well, I've determined when I consider it safe to land to have all those things. And so then you can just follow it.
We don't have all the rules for you, but there's lots of rules online. But again, you're looking for some ones, maybe working with an instructor too, is figure out what are some rules maybe that you could follow. And a good thing to do is you can probably find a lot of these like SOPs and things online and pull out the ones you're like, that makes sense to me. I'm going to adopt that because it makes your decision making easier. That debate of am I going around or not? Well, that's one right there. I'm not stabilized, I'm going around. It's already made. I'm not waiting till I get low to the ground and now I'm, you know, all over the runway or whatever. I'm floating forever because I have too much speed. It's already made and I made that decision early because of my SOP. So then I know this next one, Mary, tell us about this idea of doing risk assessment before we even start flying.
Yeah, so we talked about, so the SOPs and the personal minimums are to establish kind of the set of rules and guidelines that you're going to abide by when making a decision to fly. But then there comes the day of the flight, you're standing in the FBO or on the tie downs, deciding if you're going to make the flight or not. And there's a couple tools we're going to talk about today. A FRAT tool, the PAVE checklist, and the CORD acronym all are kind of cover the similar things. So you can pretty much decide which one of those you like. Certainly can use more than one, maybe even take what you like of different ones and kind of combine them to what works for you. But the biggest takeaway is going to be, if you look down at the bottom, the image is a flight risk assessment tool. So a FRAT, that's a narrative FRAT, and using the PAVE checklist within it. So it's identifying a hazard, then identifying a risk. And I think a good thing to understand is a risk is typically what the NTSB categorizes as an accident cause. So loss of control, CFIT, and fuel exhaustion are all reasons NTSB labels accidents, the cause of accidents happening.
What's the CFIT stand for again for the audience, just in case they don't know?
Sorry, controlled flight into terrain. And LOC is the loss of control. And then it looks into the likelihood of that happening, how severe it is, and then that's how it determines if that specific hazard is a risk or not. And then you can go from there to decide, you know, if you should make the flight. But we'll go more into it on the following slides.
Yeah, we're going to hit each one of these, just go a little bit more into detail on each one. So this next one is the actual FRAT assessment tool. I know there's a couple different types here, but basically what you're doing is it's got like some common things that you might see. It's going to have things like, you know, often you'll see things like crosswind on them, or different types of weather, your proficiency, how often you've been flying, all kinds of, they've already listed out, and they've done some kind of mathematical calculations to kind of figure out, okay, statistically, where do you fall? And so, and I believe in this first one, I believe you said this was the narrative one. Am I correct about that?
So yeah, this one's narrative, but you can also use numerical, which kind of takes into account for you. And you, oh yeah, you'll see it in a second.
Yeah, we'll pop that up in a second here.
Okay.
So this one's a narrative one. It just shows you kind of that grid, and you would kind of look and see where you're fit based on the different categories. And then here is the one it's one where you plug the numbers in. And so I've seen is the FAA's got one. We have a link to it on the handout, I know.
It is, yep.
And a handout again, QR code. On some of the slides, we also have the URL, depending on how we could fit things. And so in this case, you would just go and check things off. You would either put in numbers or click boxes, and it will then calculate for you what your risk is. And then after you're done with that, you can say, okay, well, my risk is higher than I want it to be. What can I do to go look at these parameters? Which of these parameters can I mitigate? What can I do to improve them or get rid of them? And we'll talk about how to do that in just a little bit too.
There is a few, like a handful of apps out there that are specifically a FRAT app that you can download, that you would be able to do it on your phone and kind of plug in the numbers, and then it calculates it for you as well.
Cool.
Depending on you.
All right, let's get this next one. We get into PAVE. There we go.
PAVE. Yeah, so PAVE, again, using stands for pilot, airplane, personal minimums, or environment and external pressures. We are using that acronym to identify hazards within each of those categories. So looking at the pilot, are there any hazards associated with the pilot? Examples of that might be if you drank, or if you're low on sleep, or if you're taking a certain medicine. The airplane are hazards with thank you, Chris.
Nope.
Hazards with the airplane itself. So maybe you have your autopilot's an op, or something like that. Environment is going to be, maybe you have terrain in the area of your flight, maybe there's
weather,
high winds, weather, yeah. And then external pressures are kind of like we talked about, all of those other things. So as the specific thing that's giving you that get-there-itis. So you're trying to get someone to a meeting, or you want to get home because you don't want to pay for a hotel room. All of those sort of things kind of compiling in. So using, if you want to use the PAVE checklist, you can kind of use those categories to identify the hazards in those categories and then go from there. And ideally you have SOPs in place to help mitigate any of those from happening. When I was in private pilot training, I was very overwhelmed by the amount of acronyms, as I think most of us are. It's crazy. So I started developing what I called the PAVE checklist for myself, because I love checklists, as pilots do. But I needed a checklist for, like, we have the checklist for the plane, but I wanted a checklist kind of for myself for the pre-flight decision-making process. And then, so I made it, and it's just kind of evolved through the years. I used it with my flight instructing, and now we have made it.
Do you want me to show it yet? Just let me know when you want me to show it.
ASIFI'd, I'll say. And we have a link to this on our resource page as well. And this is an example of, I made this in training. So this is an example of where you can make whatever kind of works for you. Under pilot, it's just, again, a checklist to help me identify different hazards that may be out there. So do I have my required items? Am I following I'm safe? Am I current? Am I proficient? Do I have my flight review? Environment, I use the acronym NW CRAFT, and that, or sorry, I guess I should go on over. A is for aircrafts, right? And so this specifically, I was flying a 172, so the weight and balance is very geared towards that. So maybe you would need to change it depending on the plane that you're flying. But the main goal is that I'm just making sure that I am within weight and balance. I have all my required equipment. Going over to environment, I use the NW CRAFT acronym just because that's what my flight school used, but making sure I'm identifying any possible hazards or risks along the route. And then finally, in the external pressure section, I did kind of list a generic personal minimums, but then also I think a great point would be to list what is pressuring you to make this flight and what is your plan B to that pressure. so that you have it written down, I think will really help self-assess if you're being pressured or have an external factor influencing your decision. So if that pressure would be getting to a wedding or not paying for a hotel room, and then what your plan B is.
And I think one of the key things here too is it's obviously like, I know, Mary, you love the checklist and everything, and some folks, this is going to be like, yes, this is what I need. And then for others, they might be like, I don't want to fill this out every time. So maybe you make it a flow instead of just a list of things, and maybe you're not necessarily writing all the stuff in or copying it over, but it's a checklist for you to say, did I brief, like, what is the weather at my destination? How is my weather looking along the route? Maybe you're using like a FORFlight or a Garmin Pilot or something like that. And so you just have a flow, but the key part is the process, because I've seen this not just from you, but from other instructors here too. Another instructor that used to use this, and I was like, that's a great way to use PAVE to make it like part of our pre-flight briefing. And they would even throw like I'm safe in, which I think you got on.
It is under the pilot.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Yep. So just as a way to check all that. So I think it's all about processing, finding the right tool for you.
And I'm less familiar with Garmin Pilot, but I know FORFlight, you can make your own checklist in the app. So make a pre-flight pilot checklist, or, hazard checklist to identify, again, whatever, if you use it and if that works for you.
Yep. Or just find whatever it is that's going to work for you, whether it's a checklist, a flow, an acronym. I use, oh shoot, I'm blanking on it right now. The one that I use all the time when I'm doing an approach, they'll think about it in a second, it'll come back to me. But I have things like that where I've got stuff that I just have memorized that that's what I use when I'm flying. I know I'm freaking ready to start the approach. I go through my briefing, and I've got a whole flow for that. So Warn Biff, that's the one I was trying to think of. Warn Biff is one I use for IFR trip. Yep. Okay. All right, so this next one, we have another acronym, CORD, and this is one of the Kings actually came up with. That's why we gave them a little shout out here.
Yeah.
Again, some articles on the handout. You can get to those with that link there, or the QR code will get you to that handout. Same one throughout the thing, so you only have to do it once. But CORD is one that they recommended using while you're like sort of getting ready, and even in flight and getting ready for flight. And it's a way for them to say, what are the key parts to help avoid the different hazards. So number one, what are my current conditions with the sea? Then are there hazards that I need to be thinking about? So again, putting yourself in that mindset of like, identifying what could go wrong here. What are the things that are potentially causing this to be more dangerous than it might be otherwise, or what are the risks involved? Then are there operational changes? Do I need to make changes to my operation based on those things above? Maybe the hazard is, the hazard today is a 5-knot crosswind. You might think, actually, I've been practicing my crosswinds and I'm pretty proficient, so I'm going to lower that one down. So do I have to make any operational changes based only on that crosswind? No. Maybe though it's gusting 20 and I'm in a 172 and it's a direct crosswind. That might say, you know what, that's a big operational one. Maybe I need to change runways or do something else to change how I'm going to operate to adjust for that hazard. Maybe it's at my destination. The runway. On both places, both departure and at destination, do I have enough runway available? Is it required? How much do I need, and is it available for me? And then for my takeoff, how much excess do I have? Because again, just like you were talking about with the speed you guys had for the airlines, it was all about at this speed, either we go or we don't go, because if we're not going to go now, we got to hit the brakes. Otherwise, we're going to go off the end of the runway. And that's kind of, we used to do that in training in Seminoles and multis, the same way of making sure that we knew what speed that we knew, like at this point, we've got to go. Otherwise, we don't have enough to stop, because we're going to be off the end of the runway. The return, what's my return plan? Like I've got one like this I don't necessarily use CORD, but I do one when I get down to the end of the runway, I do my takeoff brief. And that's just part of my checklist where I get down before I call tower. I'm like, this is my takeoff brief. Do my run up, and I was like, okay, if I'm on the runway and if I have any trouble, anything weird happens, I'm hitting those brakes, pulling the engine idle, hitting the brakes and stopping. If I'm up, but I've got runway remaining, I'm putting it back down. If I am up and I'm below whatever my altitude is that I've determined for the turnaround, it's like if I'm below that, I am going straight out somewhere and or somewhere within 30 degrees or whatever to try to land. And if I'm above a certain altitude, what I've determined for that day, then I already think about too, the wind's blowing out of my left, I'm gonna turn left and come back around and land, because I always wanna turn into stuff I learned from glider training. So having a plan for how I'm going to handle a problem after takeoff. And then finally, your departure. What's my route? So, and I do that as part of my brief too. If everything goes well, then I'm going to be turning off to the west or whatever I'm going to do and climbing to this altitude. So I want to brief ahead of time to take as much decision making out of my flight as possible. And this helps you identify and plan ahead to help avoid those risks, because having no plan at all is a big hazard.
And having that plan, actually saying it out loud and having that plan takes out that 2 seconds in flight where you have to decide what you're going to do. It's already decided, so you just can do it. Kind of like, I'm sure all of us have seen the Sully movie, where it took him 30 seconds to figure out what was happening and decide what to do. So just having that decision made can make it a split action.
And of course, that was a crazy example. I mean, it's like to have both,
that
yeah, insane, both engines out at once. Yeah, crazy.
There was no way you would know. Yeah.
Yeah, but for the one, I agree with you too. It's like I actually try to put in my mindset. I don't say if I lose my engine. I'm like, when I lose my engine, this is what I'm doing, hoping to take a few of those seconds off, because I'm already anticipating this is going to happen and I'm ready to do it. So I'm trying to put myself in that mindset to help avoid that. All right. So Mary, I think, yeah, tell us about a little bit how do we mitigate these things now?
So we've determined, we've used, whether it's the FRAT, the PAVE, the cord, or whatever you decide is good for you, to determine that there is a risk associated with the flight. Then how do we mitigate that risk? One would be, if it's following PAVE again, if it's something to do with the pilot, you could fly with an instructor to improve your crosswind landings, or get more familiar with going to minimums, or get more comfortable, more proficient at the avionics in the plane. And like we talked about, having different minimums for the airplane, so that you aren't going low in a plane that you're less proficient in IFR conditions. To mitigate risk with the aircraft would be making sure you have proper maintenance, planning fuel stops, and the Kings actually mentioned this as well, planning the fuel stop for not when you need it, but instead halfway through the flight, I think is a great tip, and honestly a great SOP to put into place. The environment would be, maybe one route is risky, so planning a different route, going at a different altitude, changing the time of day that you're going, or just always having that plan B so that you have the option to cancel. Southwest, I know, has refundable plane tickets, so you can always have that like in your back pocket.
Even if you miss the flight, right? They'll still refund. Like you could get the refund.
I think it's up till 10 minutes. Well, I don't know the small print. But
well, at least they'll give you credit to get another flight. I mean, if you miss it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you still get, you don't waste your money.
Yeah. So you're gonna get there. Just let a different pilot fly through the conditions.
Right.
Which we'll kind of talk about later too. And then external pressures, managing the expectations of maybe the people that you're flying with, and having that self-awareness to recognize if you're falling victim to the external pressures or things that are influencing your decision in a negative way. And I think, we do have a zoom in on the picture on this, is that FRAT tool again, but on the right hand side added the column of mitigating the specific risks and things that you can do. So one example is, if you're not IFR proficient, add 500 to your minimums. Another is, let's see, not certified for ice, is avoiding the icing conditions, obviously, and being extra vigilant about where that icing layer is. And then under terrain, if there's high terrain, deviate south so that it doesn't even become a factor on your route.
Right. So just make a, and then again, adjusting, maybe we're going to land, I'm already planning for that. I'm not going to be pushing my fuel, fuel load and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So having these kind of mitigation tools in there to change your flight according to make it less risky.
Exactly. And then there was another one that I guess is one that I know the Kings talk about. It's also in the FAA stuff, which is the idea of using, that's another acronym again. And again, we're giving you these tools. You've probably seen them. It doesn't mean you have to use them all. We're just trying to really talk about the process. So we talked about what to do before flight, what you can do to mitigate, and mitigate basically is, what can I do to make this situation better? What can I do to make the risk lower? Because we always know there are risks. Every time we get in that airplane, every time we drive to the airport, there's a risk. So it's about, what can I do to try to mitigate the risk to reduce some of that? And in this case, CARE is just one that they love to use, and King's talked about it, and I said the FAA's got it as well. It's consequences, alternatives, reality, and external pressures. And the reality one and the external pressures, to me, are probably in my own flying, are the most important ones. So the consequences, what is changing? So what's happening? what consequences do those things have for my flight? Is the weather decreasing? Now that's raising that risk. Maybe I need to be thinking about, I'm not going to continue on in this. Are the winds changing? Is the terrain, is my fuel load changing? My engine running differently? Whatever, right? What's happening and what are the consequences for what's going on? So you got to be paying attention. The alternatives, do I have time to use an alternative? Are there more alternatives? So start to think, you have to start thinking to yourself, okay, what can I do? Hopefully I've already got plan B, maybe even plan C already thought out, but maybe I've got to do it on the fly. Like I'm not even close to my alternate and I'm thinking, man, this weather's not what I thought. Look around, what's my closest airport? Where can I go? Like I said, the key for me here is reality and external pressures, the reality. Am I accepting what is happening? Because you might see, here are these things going on, right? Man, that weather's getting bad, and they just keep going. And there's accidents. I think we put another one on the handout. It was, I forget the name of it right now, but it was about a gentleman flying his daughter, two daughters, and one of their boyfriends up into Chicago. And man, it's just heartbreaking to listen to it. It's a video, an ASI video, but you know, you could just hear him kind of going like, well, this weather's really bad and he's not instrument rated and he's in this weather and he's trying to maintain VFR. He's given multiple opportunities to go land, and all he would have to do is, they were even saying, they weren't even making him declare an emergency. Like, yes, we're IFR here, but it's 1,000 feet. You can come land if you want to, you know? And he just was like, no, I don't want to get stuck. So am I accepting the reality of what's going on and what's actually happening? That's that self-check. Like, am I making good decisions here? And then the external pressures part. And is maybe my perception of reality being affected by what I'm trying to do? Because we tend to be very goal-oriented as pilots. I don't think anybody here is dumb, but we tend to put pressure on ourselves without realizing it and being aware of the fact that we're doing that. So for me, is, am I resisting my goal of completing the flight? Maybe I need to change my goal, right? Maybe my goal just needs to be, I want a safe end of this flight, regardless of where I end up landing. ASI's got a great model. I personally like this one. I add one onto it. Theirs is anticipate what's going to happen. So I'm looking. That's where my vigilance comes in. I'm looking for things to go wrong. So I'm trying to monitor so that I'm ahead of it. If I see something, I recognize it. So I'm okay. Got it. Engine oil. You know, engine pressure's falling. Temp is rising. Now do something about it. I'm reducing power and I'm going to go land. And maybe I'm going to land in a field, right? Whatever it might need to be, and then evaluate, how's it going? So maybe at first I'm just going to, you know, reduce power, increase airspeed, see if I can get it cooled down and get me to an airport. How's that working? Not working. Now I've got to change again, evaluate, and start to loop over. So it's all about this mindset to me, and it's about being ready to adjust, because so often we get locked into our plan. We might notice the consequences of the alternatives, but we're locked into that goal of like, well, I'm going here. And so maybe we got to be ready to change that and be flexible and say, it's okay if I land somewhere else, or if I end up not being able to get to where I want to go. Great article, by the way, on the handout. I think it's a 90% solution or something. It was written by George Perry, former head of the Air Safety Institute. So check that one out too. He talks about how to be flexible with flying. All right, let's go to this next one here. So now we're at about quarter till, like 12 till. So let's see if we can knock these last couple ones out.
So real world in-flight risk mitigation. So we talked about all of the things that we can do to just help us decide if the flight is risky, if we should go or not. But now, once you're in flight, mitigating if a risk hazard does end up happening. So we came up with a few examples, real world examples of things that happened to us, of how we used risk mitigation in flight. One, I'll start with my good one. I lost my electrical system in flight with a student, and it started with a transponder. ATC couldn't catch us on the transponder. They asked us to reset it. Then we couldn't respond to ATC, and so and then the lights got dim. We slowly saw all the things kind of breaking, but by the time we realized it, we had lost comms with ATC. So we did some trouble. We recognized that it was happening. We acted by let's see, we descended to 2000. I actually called Tower. I had their phone number because it's the airport I was a CFI at. Called Tower with the Bluetooth in my headset to get permission to land. I kind of told, you know, we're over the beach. We lost our electrical. Can we come land? And they actually cleared me to land. Cleared left base 24, clear to land. Be looking for the light gun signals. So that's a case where it was a perfect anticipate, where you're just monitoring any changes, recognize that, okay, things are starting to be funky with the electrical, and then we acted and landed within 10 minutes, and nothing really went, like, ended up being a totally fine flight. And then my student promptly got a handheld afterwards. But it was a great way to mitigate that risk that ended up happening in flight. Chris, I know you have some.
Let me give you one of the bad ones. My first one is the bad one after your flight. I've told the story before, so I'll do the kind of an abbreviated version. I had taken a student of mine, had his own 172, was working on his instructor rating, asked me to take his wife up to a place they had up in Gunnison, Colorado. He told me, he briefed me about the whole thing. He's like, go up early in the morning, should be smooth flying, you'll have a nice tailwind typically. He knew this route really well, so he was giving me advice that I should have listened to. We get up there, great tailwind, perfectly smooth flight, easy landing. It was just a wonderful flight, very quick. So we got up there earlier than I even thought we were, because we had left at like 6 in the morning. And he told me the mountains start to get warm and the air gets really turbulent and the wind picks up as you get to noon and in the afternoon, and it gets really bad. He recommended to me, you're welcome to stay overnight. You can go, even his wife was an archaeologist, stay, you can go check out the dig and then just fly back the next morning when the weather's good. Well, I had my fault, I know, is get-home-itis. I had dropped her off and she said, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm good. This weather was great. I'm going to fly back. That was my mistake. I'm up in the mountains that I wasn't used to being in. They were really, really big. I didn't realize how big mountains were until I went to Colorado, having grown up on the East Coast. And on the way back, I got pummeled by turbulence to the point where I was trying to fly VA. I was trying to avoid, I had headwinds. I was trying to avoid having to go to the bathroom. So I was like, okay, I'm just not going to drink as much water. So I know I was probably getting a little bit of hypoxic and dehydrated. Worst flight ever. And the entire time, what I wasn't doing was anticipating, recognizing, and acting. I was just like, I'm going to get home. I'm just going to make it. I'll power through this. I made the worst landing ever when I got back. Didn't hurt anything, but it was just horrible landing. And I'm like, what the heck happened? And then looking back, I'm like, that was stupid. And so I learned from that not to do that. I could have stopped somewhere and like taken a break, gone to the restroom, but I was like, no, I'll make it. So bad example of me not accepting reality. I just wanted to get home, and it was dumb. So all right, let's see, we've got about 10. Want to do one more of your examples and then we'll move on?
So this one is not great. So I actually was in the backseat for this flight. An instructor and a student were up front. It was night, it was winter, but we were in North Carolina, and a lot of times, especially in the South, you kind of forget about icing because it's less, it doesn't happen on the ground as much. But we were in flight from Wilmington to Fayetteville, and ATC asked us to climb to 9,000 we were in an Arrow, Piper Arrow, and they asked us to climb to 9,000 for traffic. So they accepted the climb, no issues, climbed right up, not even thinking about where the icing layer was, because we checked our route for the flight and all was good, but we didn't think about the bigger picture. So we accepted the climb to 9,000. Very soon after, our airspeed started dropping quick. And the pilot up front, I wouldn't say panicked, but got extremely nervous and thought we were stalling. So started to push the nose over, which is exactly what you should not do. We're now night IMC in icing conditions. Pushes the nose over because the airspeed's dropping and they think we're stalling. And from the back seat, I, again, anticipating and recognizing it's night out, it's cold. Did someone turn on the pitot heat? And that's exactly what hadn't happened. So as soon as they turned that pitot heat on, our airspeed started coming back. We had lost probably 1,000 feet of altitude, but thank goodness we were at 9,000. And I don't think got a phone number from anybody. Thank goodness. But that's another case where we probably didn't anticipate we should have anticipated that back at the FBO when we planned our flight, and then anticipated again when ATC gave us the climb. We should have known where the icing layer was, not just that our flight was good, but was able to act accurately based on what was going on in the situation. Not proud of that one.
Yeah, and I've had similar ones like that too, and I've told stories. In fact, I think I did put the episode on the handout. Katie Pribble and I, one of our senior VPs, went through and we bared it all and talked about all the dumb things we've done and stuff we learned from it, and hopefully, and to allow people to be like, learn from what we did and like do better on this kind of stuff, the decision making. So let's go ahead. We got one basic concept left and we're going to wrap it up. Post-flight evaluation, I've talked about this in the past. I put a link to that episode on the handout. But the basic idea here is that you can do something after your flight. I actually like to use this after flight lessons too, where you take this form, and I've got both an article and a copy of this form available to you on the handout. And what you can do is you write down the major events and then grade yourself. How did I do? How did I handle that icing encounter? How did I handle that decision to just go ahead and fly through turbulence in the mountains in the afternoon, like I had literally been told not to do? How did that go? And then write down for what can I do to improve? And maybe you give yourself a 5, like I did amazingly well with my decision making or my performance. How can I double down and keep that up? Or if I did really poorly, what can I do to improve it? And we're going to show you some quick examples here too, that Mary and I both came up with. We'll just do one each maybe.
Perfect.
I have one here that I did for my first one. I said haze obscured. I was coming into Frederick in the afternoon. I was coming westbound, so the sun is going down. It was a hazy day here on the East Coast, and I could not see. I knew the airport was ahead. I was trying to slowly descend down from my cross country coming from the eastern shore of Maryland. I was trying to get down to pattern altitude so that I could enter the pattern, because I'd already talked to Tower. They had already given me the enter the 45, all that kind of stuff, but I couldn't see it. So I could see it on the GPS, and I was like, man, what am I going to do? Luckily, I was able to see it before I was too close. I was able to pick up my landmarks and airport, but I was like, that was bad. And so I was like, that wasn't safe. And I really thought about that. So if I had done this after that flight, because I hadn't learned this part yet, I would have given myself a 1, and I would have said, you know what I should have done? And this is actually what I did do. I ended up talking to ATC later and saying, if that happens, would it be okay if I stayed up higher and then maybe like gotten over the airport? So I said, now I'm up here. I'm going to stay up above pattern altitude until I've got it, and then talk to you guys. And they said, yeah, just tell us what you're doing. It's completely okay. They would totally understand and work with me to then give me some direction on, now you got the airport in sight, and I'll do a descent or do whatever. They would have helped me out with that. So that's how I would have used this form to help me with that. What about pick one of yours maybe, Mary?
I'm going to do density altitude. I graded myself on a 1. We were somewhere, I would say in Arizona or New Mexico, and took off from an airport, probably about 3,000 feet MSL in June. So it was hot, and I was flying with another pilot who owned the plane and kind of assumed they had done all the performance stuff for the plane, and I was just pretty much hands off. And we took off and we were pitching for best climb, and we weren't climbing. Descended, climbed. It was actually kind of going back and forth, but luckily was a mountain in the distance, not super close, but we continued on, and we were flying towards this mountain with a fluctuating, like our VSI was going positive to negative to positive to negative. And looking back, I'm like, what were we thinking? And probably the biggest takeaways for me would be, well, don't do that again. But also, not just relying on somebody else to do the performance, confirm, hey, you did the performance calculations for this, right? We're good to go. But also, I had done all my training at the beach on the East Coast, so I really didn't have a lot of density altitude, high altitude flying, and did 0 training before flying out there. And I should have at least taken an online course, if not flown with an instructor, to get my bearings on what to expect and how to be a safe flyer in that environment. So that, not smart.
And I think that the key here is this idea of, after every flight, what are the major things that happen? And then again, grade yourself and say, what can I do to improve? And the other part, you can see we had some good ones here too. I know you handled a bird strike really well. We just don't have time to talk about all of them. And I had an encounter with ice that I felt like I exerted good PIC authority, and I've talked about that in the past as well. And I was like, I definitely want to keep that up. That was good. That was good performance. And then, but I even had one where I was like, this is what I want to do to improve though. Maybe in hindsight, I could say I could have done this better. And it's a great tool for doing that. So there's an article, and this form is there for you. So it's a great exercise to help you learn from every flight that you do. So let's wrap this up with key takeaways, and then we're going to officially end the webinar in just a moment for the folks that need to do that for the wings credit type stuff. So key takeaways, number 1, risk management begins well before you start flying. It's maybe you'll do the second one here, Mary, but well before that, and it continues all the way through post-flight. So the entire time you've got to be in that mindset of, it's not just like, oh, well, my briefing is good, off we go, and I don't have to think anymore. The entire time you've got to be constantly reevaluating, how am I doing? What can I do to improve this flight? How do I get rid of these risks that are coming up? And what are the risks that I'm encountering to make it safer? Do you want to take the second one?
Yeah. So, yeah. And then constantly managing our mindset of, not being mission oriented. We've talked about this before. It's not until, you know, I think it was the last webinar we said it's not a landing until you decide it's a landing. And it's not, the flight's not going to go until you decide it's to go, instead of the opposite. So really making sure you're not being influenced by these external pressures, having the mindset of that risk management, incorporating it into your flows of kind of the pre-flight to the pre-flight.
And I think the key follow-up to that too is it's that mindset is developing that self-awareness, that third one here we've got, which is that especially as pilots, we tend to be, I don't think most pilots we know, the ones I come across, are usually pretty quick, they're smart, and they seem to be, you know, on top of things. And most of the time I don't come across people that are crazy risk, but we need to be aware of our own limitations. And whether, then for me, I know it's goal orientedness. We have this tendency that we want to complete our mission. That's what we've done during our training, and just being aware of that so we can try to avoid getting into traps that we set for ourselves because we want to reach our goal. And we just have to adjust those goals. And how about that last one there?
Everyone thinks different, everyone operates different. So there's not one correct method to doing this. The goal is just for safe flying. So take what we've talked about today and develop or use what works best for you, what works best for your personality, for your way of thinking, for the airplane that you're flying, and for the type of flying that you're doing. Make a checklist if you like checklists. If you like numbers, maybe use a FRAT tool, but take whatever is most likely going to not only work well for you to make safe decisions, but also work well for you and not be a hassle to do. You're like, I'm not a numbers person, so I would not want to do a FRAT before every flight, but I love a checklist. So that's why I created the PAVE checklist. So do whatever works for you and kind of your personality type.
Yeah, and for me, it's like, I know Mary, I like a checklist as well, but for me, definitely, I have certain mental things like that warm biff I like to use. I've just found some that just resonate with me, and other ones that don't. Like there's the decide model, great model. I don't like that one, so I don't particularly use it.
Yeah.
But I use the ASI one. I love that ASI one. I actually use that while I'm flying. Anticipate, recognize, act, and I add on the evaluate and then start the loop over. So find the ones that work for you and build it as a habit. That will help you. All right, I know that we are just a second over time. Dan, you want to do a quick mention here of AOPA membership as we get ready to wrap this up?
Absolutely, happy to. Thank you, Chris. Great job, Mary, Chris. Very informative. AOPA Foundation is the philanthropic arm of AOPA, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. It is the world's largest civil aviation organization. Hundreds of thousands of pilots, aircraft owners, aircraft enthusiasts are members as well. We have less than half of all certificated pilots are members of AOPA, but because of that voice, because of that leverage, we're able to make a big difference in Washington, but also at the regional and local levels as well. So to help support aviation, keep it going strong, more members the better. If we're less than half now, imagine what we could get done if we had 3/4 or all of the certificated pilots as members of AOPA. So encourage you to join. Also great benefits, magazines, finger on the pulse of aviation, what's happening through our magazines, newsletters, good stuff, great member discounts. So lots to offer as an AOPA member. We hope that you are not yet a member. You will take advantage of that by going to aopa.org/membership. And if you are a member already, thank you. We appreciate you.
You bet. All right, next time, we are excited about the title because we were laughing about it. So next time, our next episode is November 20th, 2025 at 12:01 Eastern. I believe I've adjusted my UTC time correctly because I know that we are going to be going to the daylight savings shift by then, so it should be 1700 UTC. It's Optimus flying data to transform your flight training and proficiency too. Ages 14 and up, battery sold separately. So the big thing we're doing here on this one is we have a presentation. It's by Greg from the Pilot Institute. You may have seen some of that ground school. He's going to be on with us, and we're excited because Mary saw this presentation, I know, at NAFI, and we're going to kind of adapt some of that for our audience. And it's really cool. And he did a survey and found it's cool. It's data driven. You don't get that as much as we would love to have in aviation for what you can do to make not just your like primary flight training, even though that was kind of what they were looking at, but there are definite things that we can learn for our own proficiency. So if you're going for an advanced certificate, doing a flight review, whatever it might be, there are some tips on how to look for that great school, the great instructors, just wherever you need to go and do your training. It's got some great tips. So I can't wait for that one. If you have ideas for topics, please let us know. FTinitiative@aopa.org. And again, is that link okay? I saw some stuff in the chat. The link might not be exactly right. I know the QR code works to take you to our resource page where the handouts are. but I think maybe the link is maybe something misspelled in there. I'm not sure. So we'll have to check on that. But I hope that's working. We are going to have a short one where hopefully by next month we'll have our new vanity URL, which is just going to be aopa.org/what's up. Looking forward to that. All right, Dan, did we have any questions? No questions?
We had a handful of people sharing their personal minimums, which was really interesting. So yeah, I think that was great. So they were listening, they were paying attention, and they were contributing in that sense. There were a few messages of constructive criticism for the GoToWebinar platform, as well as presentation pieces. So thank you for all that contributed that. We will look at each and every one of those and do our best to improve for the future. But at the end, there were no questions that we had to address. So great job, Mary, Chris.
Any good stories that we want to share though? One or two of those, or anything you saw there?
Yeah, I think it was just kind of, you know, personal minimums on what they did and what they thought, but there weren't really any stories to share with the audience today.
All right, cool. All right, so I actually see some examples. I'm just flipping through right there. I see like 2 miles prior to final approach fix, throttle, props, mixture, gear, flaps, fuel switches, everything's done. Autopilot is off, runway lights on. So just examples of that. So definitely go and look for things that you could use for your SOP. I think that would be a good idea. And ask people. That's where we get ideas. I know Mary and I were just bouncing stuff off each other.
Yeah.
We just had all kinds of stuff that developed. Even part of that handout, there were some things. So please check all that out. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for being with us today. I'm glad to have you all on the show with us and in the audience. We appreciate that. And don't forget, let me just back it up one time. Next time, Optimus flying. Hopefully you get the joke there, to transform your flight training. So I hope you dig that. We will see you then in October. Dan and Mary, and for Stephen and Chris, we'll see you guys next time, and hopefully have some good flying out there.
Thanks. See you guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.